Sekeres and Price from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the historic Wall Center, and a presentation of Bet 365. We have hit NHL trade deadline. The bell has rung. But as just mentioned, if you were joining us for the countdown program portion of this program, and Blake's mention of Cam Robinson's tweets, there are typically deals that are done at the death that get reported in the 15, 20, even sometimes 30 to 45 minutes after NHL trade deadline. So we have not seen anything from the Vancouver Canucks this moment, but we have also not seen anybody say, that's it, the Canucks are done, no deals coming today. I say that because the Montreal Canadiens have already informed their media they're done. They wound up hanging on to David Savard and Yoel Armia, two of their rentals who were gaining some interest.
Thomas Rance is willing to go out onto his limb, though, from the Athletic. Rance saying the Canucks are done for the day.
Well, done. They didn't start.
They didn't start.
There was no there.
Wow. I'm surprised. I'm surprised that...
Well, I told you earlier in the week, partner, I thought there was a better than 50-50 chance that they did nothing, including Carson Soucy, who I wondered whether he would waive his no-move. He did wind up waiving his no-move clause to the New York Rangers, but I felt like that was really the only deal the Vancouver Canucks wanted to make. I think they had talked themselves into keeping Besser, Suter, and Forbert for the playoff push. I do think they want to re-sign Derek Forbert. Besser and Suter, I think they're content to let them walk in free agency. Maybe you would get a pick for the negotiation rights for Brock Besser after the season. But I think the playoffs is that important to this ownership group and to this franchise, and I think that is their number one goal, to get back to the Stanley Cup playoffs for the second straight year. They haven't done that since, 2012, 2013, if I'm not mistaken, the two first-round losses to LA and San Jose in succession. They've been back to the playoffs 3 times since then, if you include the bubble playoff run of 2020, the 2015 first-round exit to the Calgary Flames, and, of course, last year's 2-round run where they bow out in Game 7 to the Edmonton Oilers.
If you're watching on YouTube, get into the chat. Let us know what you think about the lack of moves by the Vancouver Canucks. You can respond to our live feed on Twitter as well, and we'll get to some of that feedback throughout the course of the day as the Canucks choose to not make a deal. And I think we have to frame it as such, Matt.
Let's be 100% sure here. I like Thomas too, but let's see if anything came right at the death here. Let's give it a little more time. We've got it. We'll use some.
But Matt, we have to frame it as such, though, that if that's true and they are done for the day, given how vibrant the market was, it was a choice.
No question. No question.
It wasn't we couldn't find a dance partner.
No question.
And I see people with that refrain in the chat. In previous years where it's a quiet deadline, that can often be the case. This year, with the promise of an escalating cap over the next few seasons, the wheeling and dealing was happening. Again, we've given you the countless examples of guys like Kuzmenko and Beauvillier, 2 ex-Canucks, getting traded for good stock. The Canucks not taking part in that was a choice.
If you believe that, I've got Beachfront Resort in Gaza ready to sell you. Let's face it. No, there were prices and significant prices being paid for rentals. In fact, Blake, I can't even remember the last time that rentals were fetching prices like this. Remember a few years ago, we went through a deadline where I don't think there was a first-round pick at all moved. It was all seconds. We were talking about how that's the new currency. NHL general managers were loath to give up those first-round picks for rentals. And then the sort of pendulum swung to, no, you need difference makers. We'll throw in first-round picks if we get difference makers. But, I mean, in this deadline, you can even talk about guys who... I think the Toronto Maple Leafs made a pretty wise trade for Scott Laughton, given the market. They gave up a conditional first and a B-level prospect, if that, for Laughton, a 4th and a 6th. Laughton's a $3 million, 31-year-old, very serviceable third-line center with term left. But he went for a first-round pick. You take a look at some of these other deals and what was moved by way of currency. So there were deals available to the Vancouver Canucks. I'm just wondering how much they pursued them, Blake. I'm wondering how much they marketed Besser and Suter and Forbort. I want to know whether they were really pushing and counter-offering or whether they just sat back and said, if somebody gives us a Godfather offer, we'll take it. Otherwise, we want to keep these players and make the playoffs.
Darren Drager reporting there's no extension for Besser right now, and the Canucks are indeed done as well. So I think we can start to believe that is the case. And what you see is what you get for the Vancouver Canucks, who now have all the pressure in the world, Matt, to make the playoffs. If they fail to make the playoffs now, this looks even worse on the Vancouver Canucks because you keep in your back pocket 3 UFAs that could have helped to replenish the cupboard in some way, shape, or form. And even re-signing those UFAs, Matt, I don't think is a get-out-of-jail-free card. Even if you bring back Forbort and Suter on decent freight, if you miss the playoffs, it's still a missed opportunity.
Yeah, and I thought David Quadrelli made a very good point with us in that half-hour countdown show we did. When the deadline comes and goes, you lose leverage with Brock Besser on a contract extension. If Besser truly did really want to stay in Vancouver, that this is his first choice beyond all the other markets and teams that will be interested in his services on July 1st, then the best time to get that extension done was prior to 12 noon Pacific today. We have seen other teams do this. Why? Johnston got a contract extension with the Dallas Stars here today, Blake. Going back to Alex Burrows way back when, right? When the Canucks got him on that sweetheart deal, the 4 years, $2 million per, because there was trade interest in him, and they went to him and his agent and said, look, we've got a deal here that we're willing to accept unless you'll play ball with us on a contract extension. Heck, the Canucks did that a little bit with Elias Pettersson last year, if you'll remember. So they did not use the pressure points of the deadline to get a contract extension done with Besser. We have a Brad Marchand trade, do we?
Well, it's close. Florida looks like they are likely to be the ones, but Vegas, I think, is trying to peel that one free too, apparently, as well. So Marchand looks like he might be a Panther, but we'll see here as the moments. Oh, no, I think TSN is going with it. It's done. Marchand to the Panthers. So
we can also tell you Patrik Allvin is scheduled to speak here in 10 or 15 minutes. So the Canucks general manager is going to go quickly here right out of the hop. It tends to be the case when a Canadian team does nothing. A, they want to get their day over with. But B, also, you typically have other Canadian GMs who are dealing with matters, trade calls, if they did anything at the desk. So they sort of work with each other and the teams to make sure there's not a lot of overlap between GM press conferences. We are going to fire a Surrey Mitsubishi poll question here in a second. It'll be available on the Sekeres and Price X and YouTube channels. How do you grade the Canucks trade deadline this week? Pass or fail? That'll be up here momentarily. A presentation of Surrey Mitsubishi, where they are trying to get EP40 back to the top. Everyone at the dealership and beyond rallying behind the hometown hero. Every time EP40 scores a point, you save $500 the next day on any new or used vehicle. 2 points, $1,000. 5 points, $2,500. You got to mention Sekeres and Price. That offer is valid until the next game day. Time to cheer EP40 back to the top. Score more, save more. More value, more savings. Bring them any offer. Surrey Mitsubishi will beat it. Visit 13820 104th Avenue in Surrey.
I encourage those of you that believe that the O'Connor and Pettersson trades allows them to pass, vote pass. I would love to know how many people believe that in their heart of hearts, that making the O'Connor and Pettersson deals, Marcus that is, makes up for the quietness this week. That they'd done their deals, that's all they needed to do, and that's why they were quiet this week. If you believe that, vote pass, and they even sent us a note to that effect, because I'd like to know how many people buy into that, subscribe to that, and believe that they've already. I mean, this administration has not been quiet on trades. They are the busiest organization over the last couple of years in transactions. So, and we have said they are an early business worker here.
Early mover.
Yeah.
Well, they're an early mover, but, and this is somewhat of a function of Jim Rutherford being around as long as he has been, but Jim Rutherford has made 25 trades on deadline day since 2006. So typically a Jim Rutherford organization
makes at least one. Yeah.
One and a bit.
Yeah.
Almost, yeah. Trade on deadline day. I'm actually a little surprised they didn't do something like you suggested, Blake, bring in a warm body for the playoff push for a late round pick, although I'm not sure what a late round pick gets you in this market. You even make a minor leaguer for minor leaguer trade. You could have had something to present today. Look, Canucks fans had been losing faith in this management group since the summer. Since the summer when they didn't fix the defense appropriately. Then you get into season. Some of those free agents aren't working out. You have to move on Heinen and Desharnais. You have to bring resolution to the JT Miller-Elias Pettersson feud. And, even moving on from a Carson Soucy is admitting a mistake, right? You thought you were going to get your years of service out of Carson Soucy. They salvaged that with a third-round pick from the Rangers. The first pick in the third round as it stands right now, because it's the San Jose pick, so number 65 overall. And if you think that trade is a little bit wanting because the prices for Luke Shannon and other defensemen, I hear you there. But remember, Soucy had the full no move. He didn't really want to move, so they had to play ball in a limited marketplace.
Brock Besser just got a ton of cards, didn't he? Because they can't miss the playoffs and lose Brock Besser. Can they? Like, can you imagine?
That's disaster. That's disaster. But Blake, we talk about the playoffs. That is taking our eye off the prize. Patrik Allvin, the one guy in the market who seemed angry at the second round playoff loss to Edmonton last year. The building gave the Canucks a standing ovation for losing in Game 7 to Edmonton. Allvin comes out a couple of days later, throws down a gauntlet. Not good enough. That's not what our aspiration is. We're here to build a championship-level club. Fast forward 9 months, and the Vancouver Canucks are all in on making the playoffs. You're 26th in the league in goal scoring at 2.74, and you had JT Miller for most of this season. You're 20th in goals against average at 3.03. You have your Norris Trophy winning defenseman who is hurt and out of the lineup. You have your Vezina finalist goaltender who is hurt with no real return date. You're not a contender. You're not aspiring to be a cup champion. You're looking to sneak into the playoffs and get a couple of home dates? Wow. That's got to be really disappointing for everybody who heard Allvin last May and was like, right on, Patrik. That's the sort of messaging, that's the sort of aspiration we have been waiting for from a Canucks manager.
Well, truthfully, like for the last couple of trade deadlines, it was abundantly clear where the direction of the team, what needed to be done, where they were in their arc. I think it was a lot easier to suss out, okay, what's our order of business here at this deadline? The reload year 2 years ago, and then a fabulous year last year where it was abundantly clear you had to buy, you had to bolster for the playoffs. It was way more straightforward. This one took some stones. This deadline took, again, I'll use the phrase, some courage of conviction here. What are you? And I respect the fact that they're early movers. I do. I respect the fact that they got some business done.
I think it's strategically wise. It gives your player more time to integrate into the new, and you get them for more games.
100%.
I love that they're early movers.
But when you get to this deadline and you see these prices, how do you not hedge your bets here a little bit on making sure we might not make the playoffs? We better get some assets to call our own here. Or if you're pretty sure you're making the, if you're tilted, if you're 65-35 on we're making the playoffs, then give that room something to believe in. Give them a token something to know that, you know, you're behind them at the very least. This is the proverbial half pregnant that we've heard from Lawrence Gilman all these years.
Yep.
You're trying to be in between, and never mind the making the playoffs, not making the playoffs just in and of itself in that vacuum. If you lose all these players and you miss the playoffs, it starts to have hallmarks of the Jim Benning era, where it's just loss, loss, loss,
Hughes,
loss.
Verbata, others. Yep.
Mm-hmm. And you don't get the playoff revenue. Yep. Both. I mean,
we have people in our comments talking about the no plan again. A hallmark of the Benning era. We have talked about, if you do nothing at this deadline, is this 2016 the Benning Hughes moment, albeit with a team that at least has a chance to make the playoffs. Let's get to our top story, brought to you by Yellow Dog Brewing, Neighborhood Brewing, and Foolish Winery. That is, in fact, unless Pat-rik Allvin is right up here. Mike, you'll let us know when Pat-rik Allvin is ready to go down there at Rogers Arena. We think in a couple of minutes. The one that stays and the ones that got away. Brock Boeser is still a Vancouver Canuck. So is Pio Suter and Derek Forbort, for that matter. So keeping the rentals. The ones that got away, we talked about this in our countdown to deadline show earlier today. But there were 5 centermen with term who moved today. Josh Norris from Ottawa to Buffalo for Dylan Cozens, both of them tied to the Vancouver Canucks. Josh Norris, Quinn Hughes' best friend. Dylan Cozens from the Yukon, played some of his minor hockey here in British Columbia. Casey Mittelstadt from Colorado to Boston for Charlie Coyle. And Scott Lawton from Philadelphia to Toronto. Now, they weren't all the greatest of fits for the Vancouver Canucks, but for a team that is weak at center following the Miller trade, and which could be further weakened at center if Pio Suter leaves in free agency, the Canucks were hoping, and still are hoping, to acquire a second-line centerman, third-line centerman, to get a little bit more depth and talent at that position. Bruce Garriock of the Ottawa Sun reported the Canucks went well down the road with the Senators on a Josh Norris trade. Alas, he gets moved for Dylan Cozens, a second-round pick and a depth defenseman. The Senators choosing to simply swap out Norris for a second-line centerman as opposed to what it would have cost the Vancouver Canucks.
Let me ask you this, Matt. Is it going to be any easier for the Vancouver Canucks to get a center at the draft? Like, is that their gamble here?
Well, some of them have gone off the board here, right?
Right.
Like, some of these guys would have been available at the draft.
Yes,
now,
yeah.
Braden Shen, we'll see what the St. Louis Blues do if they make the playoffs and if they're willing to re-engage on Shen, but that's an older player where the offense is starting to drive. Ryan O'Reilly, but again, that's an older player. That's probably more a third-line center now. I just can't see Trevor Zegras being a fit for Rick Tocchet. He's got the offensive acumen. Pajot is not that guy anymore in terms of a second-line center. But, you know, Blake, we'll see what happens in the Stanley Cup playoffs. There were a lot of teams that have signed deals here or will be re-signing their own free agents, and maybe that shakes free a couple of top 2 centers or top 3 centers by the draft.
Yeah, I mean, and there's always new people to jump out on the menu as well, but it's going to be a creative path to get a center this summer. And I think that they unequivocally have to have that as their top priority going into the draft and going into free agency, somehow finding another top 2 centerman. Like, that is job number 1. The defense has got a future. You can see the direction of the defense core at the very least, and I think we'll see Tom Wielander here in the next few weeks as well. So, you know, that's
his playoffs start next week, so he could be done here in short order. He could go all the way up into April if they make the Frozen Four, but we shall see.
We'll see on that. Yeah.